Penn State, Jerry Sandusky scandal, 2011. For decades, Jerry Sandusky was the face of Penn State's defensive dominance. He served as the defensive coordinator under Joe Paterno and helped build one of the most respected football legacies in college history. But beneath the surface, something horrific was unfolding. Starting as early as the 1990s, Sandusky used his nonprofit charity, The Second Mile, to gain access to underprivileged boys. He targeted them, groomed them, and in many cases, assaulted them, sometimes in Penn State facilities. Reports later showed that multiple school officials, including members of the athletic department and even head coach Joe Paterno, had been made aware of concerning behavior. But instead of reporting him to authorities, they handled it internally, quietly removing him from coaching duties, but allowing him continued access to school facilities. In 2011, a grand jury indicted Sandusky. What followed was a national firestorm. He was eventually convicted on 45 counts involving 10 different boys. Joe Paterno, who had once been considered the moral compass of college football, was fired just months before his death. The NCAA responded with historic penalties, a $60 million fine, a 4-year postseason ban, scholarship reductions, and the vacating of 111 wins, stripping Paterno of his all-time wins record. Penn State had built its image on doing things the right way, and the scandal shattered that illusion. It wasn't just a failure of oversight, it was a culture of protection, silence, and denial that allowed one man to exploit young lives for years without consequence. Even now, Penn State is still rebuilding its reputation. The statue of Paterno was removed. The wins were eventually restored, but the scars of the Sandusky case remain. SMU death penalty, 1987. In the 1980s, Southern Methodist University wasn't just a rising football powerhouse. They were a national contender, pulling in top Texas talent and beating traditional giants. But beneath their success was a pay-for-play system so blatant, so institutionalized, that it forced the NCAA to do something they had never done before and haven't done since. For years, SMU boosters and university officials paid players under the table, offering cash, cars, jobs, and housing. The NCAA already sanctioned them multiple times, including placing them on probation 5 separate times between 1974 and 1985. But the payments never stopped. In fact, they were documented. A literal payroll list existed for players, organized by school officials and alumni. When the scandal finally came to a head in 1987, the NCAA dropped the hammer. They issued the infamous death penalty, shutting down the entire SMU football program for the 1987 season. No games, no practices, no scholarships. And the school chose not to play in 1988 either, due to roster depletion. The sanctions included scholarship losses through 1990 and recruiting bans that crippled the team. The result was catastrophic. Nearly every player transferred out, coaches left, attendance cratered. It took SMU over 20 years to return to national relevance, and some argue the program never truly recovered. But the ripple effect didn't stop there. The NCAA had made an example out of SMU, but they also realized the consequences were too severe. Since then, no other Division I program has received the death penalty. Miami booster scandal, 2011. In 2011, a man named Nevin Shapiro turned the University of Miami upside down. He wasn't a coach or player. He was a convicted Ponzi schemer serving 20 years in federal prison. And from behind bars, he exposed one of the most widespread and lavish benefit scandals in college football history. Shapiro, a longtime Hurricanes booster, claimed he had provided more than 70 players with improper benefits from 2002 to 2010. His list was staggering: cash handouts, luxury yacht trips, expensive jewelry, nightclub outings, VIP access to strip clubs, and even paid encounters with prostitutes, all funded by money he had stolen in a $930 million Ponzi scheme. He embedded himself into the program. He sat courtside at games, partied with athletes, and even had his own suite at the stadium. Players called him Lil Luke, a nod to fellow Miami booster and rapper Uncle Luke. Photos surfaced of Shapiro arm in arm with stars like Willis McGahee, Vince Wilfork, and Devin Hester. The NCAA later confirmed much of what he had claimed. The program tried to distance itself quickly, but the damage was done. Head coach Randy Shannon, who reportedly warned players to stay away from Shapiro, had already been fired. Al Golden, who took over in 2011, inherited a mess. Miami self-imposed bowl bans in 2011 and 2012 to soften NCAA penalties. The NCAA sanctioned the program with scholarship reductions and a 3-year probation, but many argued the punishment didn't match the scale of violations. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Reggie Bush /USC 2005. Reggie Bush electrified college football during his time at USC. He won the Heisman Trophy, helped lead the Trojans to national dominance, and looked unstoppable every time he touched the ball. But behind the highlight reels was a scandal that would ultimately erase much of what he accomplished on paper. While Bush was still in school, he and his family accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in gifts from marketing agents, hoping to sign him once he turned pro. The benefits included rent-free housing for his parents, a car, travel expenses, and other luxury items, all in violation of NCAA rules at the time. The scandal came to light after a failed business relationship between Bush's family and the agents turned bitter. Lawsuits were filed, investigations were launched, and the evidence piled up. The NCAA findings were damning. Bush had received impermissible benefits, and USC had failed to monitor the situation properly. The fallout was historic. USC was hit with severe sanctions, including a 2-year bowl ban, the loss of 30 scholarships, and the forfeiture of wins from the 2004 and 2005 seasons. Bush voluntarily forfeited his Heisman Trophy, becoming the first player in history to do so. It was a major blow to the image of one of college football's most storied programs. Ohio State Tattoogate, 2010. Ohio State was a national powerhouse under head coach Jim Tressel, with BCS bowl appearances and a roster full of NFL-caliber talent. But in 2010, a scandal surfaced that started small and quickly spiraled into something that rocked the program. Several Ohio State players, including star quarterback Terrell Pryor, were found to have traded memorabilia, including jerseys, championship rings, and awards, in exchange for tattoos and cash. While the trades themselves seemed harmless to many fans, they were a direct violation of NCAA rules, which prohibited athletes from profiting off their status in any way. The real damage came when it was discovered that Tressel had known about the violations months before they became public and failed to report them. In fact, he had received emails warning him about what his players were doing, but instead of alerting compliance officials, he stayed silent. When confronted, Tressel initially denied knowledge, then admitted he had lied. The fallout was swift. Tressel resigned under pressure, ending his successful tenure in disgrace. Pryor was suspended and later left school early to enter the NFL's supplemental draft. The Buckeyes vacated all their wins from the 2010 season, including a Sugar Bowl victory, and were hit with scholarship reductions and a bowl ban. University of Michigan sign-stealing scandal, 2023. Connor Stalions was an off-field analyst with Michigan football, a former Marine who volunteered his way into the program. In October 2023, the NCAA opened an investigation into alleged off-campus scouting of future opponents, a direct violation of Bylaw 11.6.1, which bans staff from attending opponents' games in the same season. Evidence quickly pointed to Stalions. Investigators allege he purchased tickets to more than 30 games at 11 Big Ten stadiums, handing them off to associates to film sideline hand signals used by upcoming opponents. In one reported instance, Stalions was disguised in Central Michigan staff gear on the sideline for their game against Michigan State on September 2023, raising red flags about intent and deception. Michigan responded by suspending Stalions with pay, and by November 3, 2023, he resigned from the staff. Linebackers coach Chris Partridge was later fired, reportedly for counseling players on how to respond to NCAA questions about the scandal. Head coach Jim Harbaugh, while never linked directly to the scheme, accepted a 3-game Big Ten suspension that year for unrelated recruiting violations. Despite this, Michigan went on to win the 2023 national championship, and NCAA President Charlie Baker later stated he believed the title was earned fair and square. Some experts, including Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti, have urged leniency. suggesting Michigan has already been punished significantly. But penalties are still pending and could include postseason bans, scholarship reductions, or more suspensions. North Carolina academic fraud, 2010 to 2017. At the University of North Carolina, the scandal that unfolded was systemic, and it went on for nearly 2 decades. The root of the controversy was in the African and Afro-American Studies Department, where a number of so-called paper classes were offered. These weren't real courses in the traditional sense. No lectures, no attendance, just a single paper required for a passing grade. Hundreds of athletes, especially football and basketball players, were steered toward these classes to maintain eligibility and stay on the field. While the university initially framed it as an academic problem unrelated to athletics, further investigations showed how deeply athletic staff were involved. Academic counselors knowingly enrolled players in these classes to help them stay eligible. Emails showed coordination between academic and athletic departments to guide struggling athletes through the easiest possible coursework. What made the UNC scandal different was the sheer scale. Roughly 3,100 students took the bogus classes over 18 years, and around half were athletes. But when the NCAA concluded its investigation, it chose not to punish the school, arguing that because non-athletes were also enrolled, it couldn't prove the classes were created solely to benefit athletes. The backlash was fierce. Critics accused the NCAA of letting a marquee program off the hook, despite clear evidence of academic manipulation designed to protect the football and basketball teams. It reignited debates about academic integrity and whether major programs were putting sports above education. University of North Carolina kept its banners. No wins were vacated. But the damage to its reputation, especially in academic circles, lingered long after the investigations ended. Jameis Winston allegations. Florida State, 2013. Florida State quarterback Jameis Winston was the face of college football in 2013, a Heisman winner and the leader of an undefeated national championship team. But behind the scenes, a disturbing allegation hung over his meteoric rise. He had been accused of sexual assault nearly a year earlier, and the case had quietly stalled. The incident in question occurred in December 2012, when a fellow FSU student reported to police that she had been assaulted by an unknown man. It wasn't until several months later, after Winston had emerged as a football star, that his name became publicly linked to the case. By then, much of the initial evidence had already gone cold. Witnesses hadn't been thoroughly questioned. The crime scene wasn't processed properly, and the Tallahassee police had essentially shelved the investigation without informing the accuser that the suspect was Winston. When the story finally broke in November 2013, it set off a national firestorm. Critics accused the police and the university of dragging their feet to protect their quarterback. There were concerns about conflicts of interest, especially given how deeply ingrained football was in Tallahassee culture. The investigation was eventually reopened under public pressure, but no charges were filed, with prosecutors citing insufficient evidence. Even though Winston never faced criminal charges, the fallout didn't end there. Florida State later settled a Title IX lawsuit with the accuser for $950,000. The university was also criticized for failing to conduct its own timely disciplinary hearing, as required under federal law. Throughout the ordeal, Winston remained on the field, guiding FSU to a national title and continuing his career unimpeded. But the scandal raised uncomfortable questions about how allegations involving star athletes are handled, especially when millions of dollars in school reputations are on the line. Baylor sexual assault scandal, 2016. Baylor was one of the last places anyone expected a scandal of this scale. A small Christian university with a rising football program, under coach Art Briles, Baylor had become a Big 12 powerhouse. But behind the success was a culture of silence, power, and devastating neglect. Between 2012 and 2016, a wave of sexual assault allegations emerged involving Baylor football players. Women came forward accusing multiple athletes of rape and assault, often reporting incidents to university officials. But rather than investigate thoroughly or hold anyone accountable, those in power from coaches to administrators, appeared more focused on protecting the program's reputation. Internal reports would later reveal that Baylor failed to act on numerous allegations. In some cases, the university discouraged victims from filing complaints. In others, law enforcement cooperation was suspiciously absent. According to investigations, Art Briles and his staff knew about several incidents and either ignored them or worked behind the scenes to keep things quiet. One particularly chilling report alleged that Baylor football players had committed as many as 52 acts of assault over 4 years. The exact number was debated, but the culture of permissiveness was undeniable. The fallout was massive. Art Briles was fired. Baylor's president, Ken Starr, yes, the same Ken Starr from the Clinton impeachment investigation, resigned. Athletic director Ian McCaw stepped down, and the NCAA launched its own investigation. But what made the Baylor scandal stand out was how deeply the university failed its students. Football players were allowed to keep playing despite credible allegations. Victims were left unsupported, and the system, from the top down, seemed more concerned with wins and headlines than with justice. To this day, Baylor's handling of the scandal remains one of the most damning examples of institutional failure in college football history. Cam Newton recruitment scandal. 2010. Cam Newton's road to superstardom wasn't a straight shot. Before becoming a Heisman Trophy winner and national champion at Auburn, he was at the center of a swirling recruitment controversy that nearly derailed his rise. The saga began when Newton transferred from a junior college to Auburn in 2010. Almost immediately, questions surfaced about how and why he ended up there, especially given that Mississippi State had been heavily pursuing him too. Then came the bombshell, a report alleging that Newton's father, Cecil Newton, had solicited a 6-figure payment from Mississippi State boosters in exchange for his son's commitment. And the NCAA launched its own investigation. Mississippi State coaches confirmed they were approached with a pay-for-play proposition. The evidence suggested that Cecil Newton had indeed asked for money. But crucially, there was no proof Cam himself knew anything about it. This technicality became the hinge on which the entire case rested. Incredibly, just days before the SEC championship game, the NCAA ruled Newton eligible. Their reasoning? While a violation occurred, Cam's lack of direct knowledge meant Auburn could keep playing him. It was a decision that baffled some and infuriated others, especially considering the NCAA's usually strict stance on impermissible benefits. Newton went on to win the Heisman Trophy and lead Auburn to a national championship. But the cloud never fully cleared. Critics argued that Auburn had escaped accountability on a loophole. Meanwhile, the case highlighted the murky world of college football recruiting, where families, boosters, and bagmen often operate in the shadows, while athletes claim plausible deniability. Despite the controversy, Newton's legacy remained intact on the field. Maurice Claret, Ohio State, 2003. Maurice Claret had one of the fastest rises and most dramatic falls in college football history. As a true freshman in 2002, he led Ohio State to a national championship, scoring the game-winning touchdown in double overtime against Miami. He was instantly a star, but within months, the fairy tale started unraveling. In 2003, Claret was suspended for the entire season after an NCAA investigation revealed he had received thousands of dollars in improper benefits, things like cash advances from boosters and free cars. He was also accused of lying to investigators about a stolen car incident involving a friend. The suspension effectively ended his college career. Rather than returning to school, Claret attempted to challenge the NFL's eligibility rules, arguing he should be allowed to enter the draft after just 1 year out of high school. The case went to federal court, where he initially won, only for the decision to be overturned on appeal. He was ultimately barred from entering the 2004 draft. By the time Claret finally became eligible in 2005, his stock had plummeted. He was a third-round pick by the Denver Broncos, but showed up to camp out of shape, and was cut before playing a single down. Things got worse from there. In 2006, he was arrested after robbing 2 people at gunpoint outside a nightclub in Columbus. When police pulled him over, they found 4 loaded guns and a bottle of vodka in his SUV. all while he was wearing a bulletproof vest. Claret was sentenced to more than 7 years in prison, serving over 3. He eventually turned his life around, earning a degree, speaking publicly about mental health, and founding a behavioral health agency in Ohio. Marcus Vick, Virginia Tech, 2005. Marcus Vick entered college football with immense hype. As the younger brother of Michael Vick, one of the most electric players in the sport's history, expectations were sky high. He had the same dual threat ability, the same cannon arm, and the same ability to make defenders look silly. But his time at Virginia Tech was defined less by highlight plays and more by headlines, and not the good kind. Vick's off-field problems started early. In 2004, he was suspended for the entire season after being charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor. He was accused of providing alcohol to underage girls and having sexual contact with one of them. He was also cited for reckless driving and marijuana possession that year. Even with the suspension, Virginia Tech gave him another chance. The university claimed he was undergoing personal growth and deserved an opportunity to redeem himself. But 2005 was chaos. On the field, he showed flashes of brilliance and helped the Hokies go 11-2. Off the field, the controversies piled up. During the Gator Bowl, Vick deliberately stomped on the leg of Louisville defensive end Elvis Dumervil, a move that caused outrage and circulated nationwide. Just days later, he was pulled over for speeding, going 38 miles over the limit, and driving on a suspended license. That was the final straw. Virginia Tech dismissed Vick from the program entirely. The university president said, "There is no more opportunity for Marcus Vick at Virginia Tech." He declared for the NFL draft shortly after, but went undrafted. The Miami Dolphins picked him up as a free agent and converted him into a wide receiver, but he never made an impact. His NFL career ended after just 1 season. Over the years, Vick has had more run-ins with the law, including charges of brandishing a firearm, DUI, and resisting arrest. He remains one of the most frustrating what-if stories in college football. Lawrence Phillips, Nebraska, 1995. Lawrence Phillips was the ultimate contradiction, a generational talent who constantly battled personal demons. At Nebraska, he was a powerhouse running back with NFL-caliber strength and agility, helping the Cornhuskers win 2 national championships under head coach Tom Osborne. But behind the scenes, Phillips's behavior raised red flags long before the public ever found out. In 1995, Nebraska had just dominated Michigan State when news broke that Phillips had broken into the apartment of his ex-girlfriend, a Nebraska basketball player, and physically assaulted her. He dragged her down 3 flights of stairs by her hair. The incident was brutal and public. The university suspended him immediately, but the backlash was intense. Yet, just 6 weeks later, Osborne reinstated Phillips to the team, claiming he believed football was the best structure to keep him from spiraling further. Many criticized the decision as a win-at-all-costs move. Osborne defended it as giving a young man a second chance, but it became one of the most controversial moments of his Hall of Fame career. Phillips returned to the field and played in the 1996 Fiesta Bowl National Championship game. He scored a touchdown and rushed for 165 yards, helping Nebraska cap off a 12-0 season. He then declared for the NFL draft, where the St. Louis Rams still took him 6th overall, despite widespread concern about his behavior. It didn't take long for those concerns to turn into headlines. He clashed with coaches, showed up late to meetings, and was arrested multiple times, including for domestic violence against a girlfriend. He bounced around to the 49ers, Dolphins, and even the CFL, but his off-field issues always followed. Eventually, Phillips was sentenced to over 30 years in prison for domestic abuse, assault with a deadly weapon, and other charges. While incarcerated, he was charged with the murder of his cellmate, then later found dead in his cell, an apparent suicide. Bobby Petrino motorcycle crash scandal, Arkansas, 2012. In April 2012, Bobby Petrino was on top of the world. He had just led the Arkansas Razorbacks to an 11-2 season and a top 5 national ranking. The program was thriving, boosters were happy, and Petrino was seen as one of the most brilliant offensive minds in college football. Then came the motorcycle crash. At first, the story seemed like a strange but harmless accident. Petrino crashed his Harley-Davidson on a quiet Arkansas highway, sustaining injuries to his neck and face. He held a press conference shortly after, wearing a neck brace and insisting he was alone at the time of the crash. The university released a statement backing him, and the situation appeared to be contained. But everything unraveled fast. A police report later revealed that Petrino was not alone. He had been riding with Jessica Dorrell, a 25-year-old former Razorback volleyball player, whom Petrino had recently hired for a position within the football department. That hiring skipped standard protocol and raised major red flags. As it turned out, Petrino and Dorrell were having an inappropriate relationship. Not only had he hired her out of a pool of over 150 applicants, but he had also given her a $20,000 cash gift, an amount that went completely unreported. When this information surfaced, it became impossible for the university to justify his continued employment. The university launched an investigation and concluded that Petrino had knowingly misled athletic department officials, failed to disclose the relationship, and violated multiple university policies. On April 10, 2012, Arkansas officially fired him with cause, meaning he received no buyout from the multi-million-dollar contract he had signed just a year prior. The scandal became a viral spectacle. The image of Petrino in a neck brace with road rash on his face turned into a meme overnight. But behind the public mockery was a serious reminder of how power, secrecy, and personal decisions could bring down even the most successful programs in a matter of days. Petrino's fall from grace was swift. Once regarded as a genius play caller destined for an elite program, he now had to rebuild his career from the bottom. He eventually returned to coaching, but the motorcycle crash and everything it revealed became a permanent stain on his legacy. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.